Hello, everyone, and on behalf of Tse Chen Ling, welcome to the challenges and joys of retreat, stepping away from this busy world with Paula Chichester. First, we're going to go to Venerable Carol, our center director, and she's going to offer prayers.
Thanks, Effie. Sajipuki Jukshin Meto Tramri Rablingji Ni Ganpadi Sangye Jinglu Mikte Uwai Tokunam Dak Jema Chuparshu Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kam Niryatayame Sangye Chodan Suki Chonam La Janchu Pardu Dagni Kyapsuchi Dagi Chunyan Gipe Sonam Ki Drola Panchir Sangye Droparsho Sangye Chodan Suki Chonam La Janchu Pardu Dagni Kyapsuchi Dagi Chunyan Gipe Sonam Ki Drola Panchir Sangye Droparsho. Let's do the last repetition in English. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings.
Lynn?
Is it my turn? Good.
Yes, please.
Welcome, everybody, to Tse Chen Ling, beaming to you from San Francisco, California. I'm Lynn, part of the team bringing you our year-long series, Women of Wisdom, celebrating the living legacy of Buddhist women. In a few moments, we'll hear from one of these women, beaming from her home in the Shetland Islands, Paula Chichester. Partnering with us for our series is the nonprofit Treasury of Lives. Their Women's Initiative project tells the untold stories of accomplished Buddhist women in Tibet and the Himalayan region. Please stay tuned after Paula's talk when we'll screen a brief biography of a remarkable Buddhist woman from 20th century Tibet. And now, please join me in welcoming our remarkable 21st century Paula Chichester to guide us through a topic she knows deeply and well, retreat. After the next hour and a half, Paula will likely do for you what she's done for me. Encourage you to incorporate retreat in your life as one of the best gifts you can do for yourself, and as it turns out, for others. Thank you for coming to us, Paula. Over to you.
Well, welcome everyone. I'm just going to put it on the gallery view because it's not so fun to look at myself. If I can do that. I don't know. Let's see. How do I do that?
Can you tell?
Oh, well, for some reason, it's not letting me do that. That's all right.
We're used to doing this, right?
I know, but somebody, I don't know. Maybe
View up in the
maybe
right
can
hand.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just not giving me that option. So
So that you can scroll through all your people on the right-hand side, though.
yeah, I can. Well, I want to say hi to everyone, all my friends that came. Really nice of you to come. And I want you to know I have two friends here with me in the room to listen and maybe ask some questions. But before I start any talk or any gathering, I just like to have us sit for a few moments in silence and just coming into our bodies. And it's one thing to recite the refuge prayer, but it's another one to actually feel it. And most especially this bodhicitta motivation, because it's the whole reason why we do this, is to develop bodhicitta. And that is this remarkable, it starts out just as the wish for all beings to be free from suffering and be happy. But then it actually means that I myself will become enlightened so that I can really be a benefit to sentient beings. So it kind of assumes that we already understand the ideas of more than one lifetime and future lives, and also the huge undertaking that it is to wish to become enlightened. And I think that for those of us like Carol and Lynn and Judy, and who've been doing this for 45 or 50 years, realize that it does take lifetimes. And so when we generate bodhicitta, it's having this vast view of thinking about all sentient beings. So that means, millions and billions of beings. And that we understand that each and every one of those beings wants nothing else except to be liberated, really, from the causes and conditions for our strife and disharmony and ill-ease and sickness and ignorance and all these things that beings of all the realms we're under the influence of this, from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to sleep, for lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. And when we meet a being such as His Holiness or Lama Zopa Rinpoche or the Dalai Lama or many of our great teachers like Sakya Trinzen or Choden Rinpoche, many of you knew Choden Rinpoche, then we get a taste of what it's like to not be burdened by this ignorance of holding of myself, of duality, of this burden of ego, And so the idea of bodhicitta is just having this wish to be to completely realize the state that's beyond what we now experience. And we have to kind of take it on faith that exists. And I think the beauty of meeting these great masters is that a truly great master during an empowerment or any time you're with them can sometimes give you a taste of what it's like to experience this vast space instead of little me. But not only is it a vast space, but it's a vast space that's pervaded by this incredible love and bliss that we can experience in this life. We may not be able to completely realize this gone beyond self, but this bliss of love we can experience in this life. And the more we cultivate that, the more safe, the more happy, the more settled our minds are. So then that enhances our ability to let go of ourselves and to begin to experience this open vastness that we call emptiness. And so bodhicitta is that. It's this determination to experience this bliss, this love, this great, great love that inspires us to practice, to begin to look at our minds and recognize the causes and conditions that create this circle, this cycle of what they call cyclic existence, of being overwhelmed by delusion and karma. So to really understand bodhicitta, we need to understand the nature of suffering, we need to understand karma, and we need to understand refuge. We need to understand what we study, because it's only then that we can really understand what bodhicitta is. And I think some of us have had tastes of bodhicitta. And so if you've had that taste, then maybe you don't need to study. You just know this is something, something that's greater than any other experience I've ever had in my life. And if this is a taste of enlightenment, then this is worth devoting my life to, because if someone can give that to me, then if I develop bodhicitta, I can give that to somebody else. And so that's what it is about. And so I'd like to just pause for a moment and give us a chance to consider what that means, and as best as we can, feel this great love and wish for sentient beings to be free of this incredible ignorance that is so much in our face right now. We all can see it, you know, the strife on this planet is so intense. And I almost see it as like a teaching for us to inspire us to practice, you know. I mean, maybe we create this appearance of incredible disharmony and disruption and danger just to get us to inspire us, you know. I mean, I think that's a euphemistic way of looking at it. But anyway, so let's just be quiet for a few moments and consider bodhicitta. Wishing all beings to be free of suffering, to have happiness, to have balance, to have ease. And beyond the tightness of all of the insecurities that grasping an inherent existence brings us. So our motivation for this time we're going to spend together is either to, if you're just curious about retreat and Buddhism, or if you're already on the path and have taken refuge, then we can say to ourselves, you know, may this time we spend together increase my bodhicitta and my understanding. Because bodhicitta is a very courageous act, like, you know, doing something for all sentient beings. And in some cases, it requires a bit of sacrifice, you know, sometimes it can. Like all great pursuits in life, you know, sometimes we get off the beaten path, you know. So I thought that maybe it would be really helpful to you if we spent this time, if I could answer some of your questions about retreat. And I think probably the foremost question for most people today would be, why would you want to do something like that, right? Why would you want to do something like that? And for people who are unfamiliar with Buddha Dharma, it probably doesn't make any sense. Why would you want to do anything like that? So when I try to explain to people, I would say to people, well, it's a bit like going to medical school. You know, it takes people, you know, 8 to 10 years to become doctors. And at that point in time. You know, they're not doing anything else but that. I mean, sometimes they have to have part-time jobs and things like that, but generally speaking, you know, they're full-time becoming a doctor. Well, people go into retreat to become mind doctors, you know, mind, body, enlightenment doctors, because Buddhism is a very holistic um, technique for transformation. And it takes a long time. And it takes one of the things that Lama Yeshe, one of the terms that Lama Yeshe and some of Lama's students are here, he used to use the term organic. I can see I got a bit sunburned today. And what I didn't really quite understand that until at some point when I was in my first long retreat, that I cut my finger. I was chopping a piece of sourdough bread that was kind of stale, and the knife slipped and it sliced my finger pretty much to the bone. So I had to leave my retreat and get some stitches, you know. And it was an interesting exercise because, you know, in the retreat, these long retreats that I've done, it's just I just stay in my room all day and do practice, except for when I take times to go for a walk or cook, or, you know, it's just a very intensive training. And so I was just watching my finger, you know, and it took, as I watched it heal, I suddenly, because it takes a long time, like a month or something for you, you know, you watch the tissues grow and the scars forming. And I realized that's what Lama meant by organic, and that our minds, to evolve with bodhicitta, it's not just something that you learn. And I think this is what's new to Western civilization, is that bodhicitta and what we're developing to become a Buddha, learning is just the first step. And at that same time, this is a long time ago, like, you know, 30 years ago or more, I remember writing to my father, who was an educator. And I said, you know, Buddhism, it's like three-dimensional education. Whereas in the West, our education is two-dimensional education, because I mean, not completely, you know, but for a lot of us, education means we learn something and we take a test and we write it out and we've learned it and we have that information and we use that information to inform our lives and what we do. And in Buddhism, when we learn something, it means it's a total transformation of your psyche and of your body, and getting to know something about what in the West we don't even have any idea about, which is a subtle body, which is what's a big part of Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic medicine and Tibetan medicine. And I'm sure if you went to other indigenous peoples of South America or even Native Americans, they worked on this level of subtle energy, which I suppose in our Judeo-Christian world we would call spirit, you know. And and so although Buddhism is kind of presented as a science and a lot of things to learn, but there's also a deeply spiritual aspect, which is this transformative aspect. But it's different from even just Christianity, where we receive a blessing from our prayers. But in Buddha Dharma, especially in Tantra, we're actually transforming our body. We have a subtle body that we are transforming into the body of a Buddha. And so it's a big project. And it's not something you can do, at least unless you're extremely have incredible karma, very difficult to do living a normal life, you know, because yogis, I mean, our teachers, Choden Rinpoche, Kuri Senshin Rinpoche, Riba Rinpoche, all of our teachers spent at least 20 years in retreat before they began teaching us. you know, and because it takes a long time to go through these transformations. And then teachers like Lama Zopa Rinpoche, in his previous life, he spent 25, 30 years in retreat. So this training that I'm talking about that creates what we in Dharma we call the 3 bodies of a Buddha, it's very difficult to do with a regular life, with families and jobs. And I kind of hate to say that to people. And I almost feel like the Dharma teachers this day and age are kind of assuming that we all have to have that. And I think that I was fortunate because I was in kind of the first wave of Dharma students and also at a time in the 70s and 80s when the economics of the world wasn't quite as tight. And if you recall, we could work for a while and then go to India for a year, and live what we worked for 3 months, and you could come back and get another job. So it was a great time of prosperity, and also it was a culture of youth looking for an alternative. And I think a lot of people, it happened because they'd taken mushrooms or taken LSD or had some kind of alternative experience of feeling something greater than just their little mind and wanted to know what that was, So then there was this wave of people going to Asia, and then they came back and started Vajrapani Institute and Chinrezig Institute and all the different Dharma centers in the West because they had tasted this sense of bodhicitta. So, and at that point in time, the lamas were encouraging us to do retreats and, teaching the highest yoga tantra to all of us because there was the potential for us to do it. And I always feel it's kind of sad now when I hear teachers saying, well, we all have to have a job, we all have to have marriages, we all have to have children, and we don't. And but of course, most people do. And I'm being a bit radical to say this because, they don't want to scare people away. They don't want to say, oh, well, you're not going to get the goods if you just have a normal life. And I mean, you might not even get the goods if you spend your life in retreat because, I mean, creating the cause for enlightenment, you have to create a lot of causes. And this is another concept that's really new to the West, which is this concept of creating virtuous karmic potential in your mind stream. And we wonder, why some people have better lives than others, why some people, can listen to a Dharma talk and get an experience, or why some people can, go to school and get a job right away and other people don't. And it's because of this idea that comes from the East, from India and China and Tibet, and that nothing comes without creating a cause. And we learn it in science. It's in the laws of thermodynamics. It's in chemistry. It's in physics. But we've never applied it to human beings. That we have to create the cause for everything we experience. And so, I kind of don't like that word merit, but that's the word they use. And what it means is just creating the causes for a mind to realize its selflessness, to have enough power to do the practice that will allow you to concentrate well enough, to be able to realize emptiness. And so if you wonder why you want to go into retreat, it's because you want to realize emptiness. You want to develop bodhicitta. And I think that for me, even having done all these retreats, it's still, I haven't realized emptiness. And I feel that one of the things that's so important about retreat and why it's important to do retreat, and Lama Yeshe said that he wanted all his students to do a retreat every year for a month. He said everyone needs to do a retreat for a month every year to recharge their batteries and then go back into the world. Because I'm not saying we can't be in the world. I mean, one of the best ways to make this potential merit is by helping. I mean, if what Atisha said, is that, and if you can't, well, I won't, that doesn't, is that, you can make this potential just by doing virtuous activity, by being a social worker, by running Dharma centers, by being a doctor, by, helping people, raising a family, all these things. If we do them with bodhicitta motivation, they do create the cause for enlightenment. But that's perfect. And I think that what I try to tell people now is see what you're good at, what makes you happy, what nourishes you in your life. Well, just do that with bodhicitta motivation, because if you go into retreat and it's a horrible time and you're not enjoying it, you're not going to get any benefit from it. And I know that one of my friends wanted to go do a long retreat, and his guru, Rinpoche Rinpoche said, "No, dear, you'll just end up with a lot of pride. It's much better that you continue to be a psychologist and help people, So, but Lamas wanted people to do a retreat every year, and he wanted everybody in their life, at least if they could, to do one Vajrasattva retreat, which takes 3 months. Because when you do Vajrasattva retreat, it really changes your inner world. And I remember my friend Harry Sutton, some of you know Harry and Mary. And I remember when I did my first Vajrasattva retreat, Harry was around, and he'd already done it. Harry had been around the Dharma, I don't know, 5 years more than me, which back then was huge. And he said, before you do Vajrasattva retreat, it's like driving down a big freeway in California, like in LA, during rush hour traffic. He said, after you do Vajrasattva retreat, you're the only person on the road. So that's what it's like in your mind, your mind, because so the reason I'm saying it's difficult, unless you really realize to do it in daily life, is because you know what it's like. You sit down to meditate and you're thinking about what you did today and what you got to do tomorrow. It's very difficult to get that space, to get that quiet space where your thoughts aren't there. Or even if they are there, they're not distracting you. You can just watch them. And so what is very helpful about retreat is that because you don't have other things to do, when you finish your session, and maybe you have had a taste of emptiness, maybe you are getting closer to bodhicitta, when that session is ended, even though you're moving around in the world, doing things, if you can maintain that, you can maintain that awareness, because what we need the most is awareness. And I think some people, I mean, not me so much, but to try to develop those skills of mindfulness and awareness in the normal context of life isn't that easy. But that's because I'm kind of, low on the, I'm like the lowest capable being. I have to do retreat because that's the way I can do it. But I know other people can work in the world and, develop the same kind of awareness. But I also know a lot of other people who, say, oh, I'm practicing Mahamudra. Well, they're just fooling themselves, So, and case in point, I'll stop in a minute, but after I finished my second 4-year solitary retreat, I had spent about 25 years in the Gelugpa tradition, using their techniques for meditating on emptiness. And I just felt like I needed something more. And so I was looking to the Kagyus and the Nyingmas, and I had been reading Trungpa Rinpoche's books in retreat, which are very good, by the way, about Mahamudra and developing calm abiding and emptiness. And so I developed this wish to be able to take teachings from him. And I won't tell the whole story, but it was sort of a miraculous, anyway, I got to do that after the retreat was over. So all kinds of synchronicity and the help of Rabina too, actually. And so I was so excited because I was going to this teaching. I read the book. It's called Pointing Out the Dharmakaya. And I'm like, oh, yeah, right. Get to point out the Dharmakaya. I'm going to get pointing out instructions of the Dharmakaya, right? And so I get there, and they're really nice people. And I was still ordained then. So it was all free. You know, they let me stay at the center, and they're extremely nice people. And so the very first day, Trungpa Rinpoche, who is the like highest esteemed, he's just passed away, same time as Lama Zopa Rinpoche, Kagyu Lama alive. You know, he's like the Karmapa's tutor, you know? And so he said, he started his talk and he said, you know, I've been teaching Mahamudra to you people for 25 years. Because that's what they would teach. You know, all you need is you can stay in the world, you just get your Mahamudra teachings and just practice as you through your daily life and world, and you know, you're going to get it, you know? And he said, but I can tell by the questions you and the problems you bring to me that you don't understand Mahamudra at all. So you know what he did? I sat through a whole, you know, week of teachings on precious human rebirth, death and impermanence, karma, cause and effect, suffering, you know, refuge, which is what I've been doing for 25 years. But it was just perfect, you know. So I just, you know, so if you think, you know, you can do it without practice, I really question, you know. I mean, I'm sure there's some incredible people out there. So that's why you do retreat, you know. And another thing I'd like to say is that a lot of people think, oh, you know, well, what am I going to do? You know, you need money, or, you know, I have to save up all my life so I can do a retreat, you know. And thanks to my friend Roger Munro, because he helped me so much in my retreats. You know, I couldn't have had the life without him. And by the way, he's still in retreat. Because when we first got together to do retreats, we were kind of like the only people in the FPMT that wanted to do that. And so our friendship was more based on this, we're going to help each other get enlightened, you know, in one lifetime. We were very idealistic back then in our 20s. And when we ran out of, like I had some money, he had his money, and we ran out of our money when we finished. We spent 8 years doing Nundro practices and going to those enlightened experience celebrations. Because by then we were under Lama Zopa Rinpoche's tutelage, you know, saying do this and do this and do that. So we were getting all these 100,000s of this and 100,000s of that. And anyway, so then our money was finished, and I'm like, well, well, now what are we going to do? It's like, because I think we checked with Chin Raising Institute, and Vajrapani would definitely know, we don't want you. And Chin Raising Institute was, yeah, but you need $30,000 up front, you know? And so that, you know, so Roger just said, well, we're just going to become beggars. And I was terrified, you know, oh, beggars, because, you know, I was the one who had the skills to write letters. And, you know, I think we didn't even have email yet. And Tim McNeil, who was running Wisdom Publications, I talked to him and I said, well, how do you fundraise? I don't know how to do that. And he said, well, write everybody you know and tell them what you want to do and ask them for money and then call them up. Oh man, so I did that. And then the first telephone call I made was to Don Brown. Maybe some of you know Don Brown. He's a doctor in North Carolina. He started the center in North Carolina. And I was so terrified, you know, to ask for money that when he answered the phone, I hung up on him. Because, you know, in America, you don't beg, you know, and this is before any days of homeless people, you know, this is 1990. And, but I called him back and told him, and I think Judy was one of the people, and Carol Karate supported us, and Amy Miller, and it was some of the people that are here were our supporters, you know. And so I did it, and everybody that I asked for, I just asked for $10 a month or 20. Some people were more like Carol. I think Carol gave us $20 a month. And then we just karmically, we knew Martha Tack, who was the director at Milarepa Center, and she wasn't going to charge us anything. We just had to build some tiny little houses. So that's how we did it. So, and I'm only telling you this because don't let money be an obstacle. And I know Colby's here, and I think, you know, one of the kind of saddest things, I think, is that we as an organization, FPMT, doesn't support people enough to do retreat. And that's what Land of Common Abiding's, you know, for. And that it should be supported so that people don't have to pay to be there. There should be one place where people who want to do retreat can go. And they can do what I did and, you know, get a little bit of money for their food, but not have to like have this huge overhead. I mean, nowadays, if you want to go to Vajrapani for a retreat, you almost have to be rich, you know? So what are we going to do when there's normal people who would say, yeah, I'd like to do retreat someday, you know? So I think this is a issue. I've always been waving this flag at FPMTA, you know, let's support people, you know? And so anyway, maybe that's enough on doing retreat. Oh, and the other thing I'd like to say before we stop, because I've already talked about, we still have time for a lot of questions. But another reason to go into retreat, and this is something that I've only kind of begun to articulate in the last few years, which is because lately there's been all this, you know, psychological revelations about trauma and this buzzword of authenticity and what's the other one, agency, and because those issues aren't really that common in Tibetan culture, or at least they weren't. They might be now. But what that means is that the person that when you act in the world, you're not doing it because someone told you to, because you think you should, because you've been trained to be a good person, but because it's genuinely coming from deep inside yourself. And for so many of us, we don't even know what that is. You know, we've been so, as children, you know, had to conform to get the love that we needed, to get the support that we needed as children. We had to become what the adults wanted us to be. And that's what lack of authenticity is. And so then we end up living out a life that's not our true self. And because of that, then this other agency, this other buzzword these days called agency, which means you can stand up for yourself. You know what you want to do. You can say no when you need to say no. The two go together. And most of us don't have either of those, and we may never get them this whole life. But what I have come to understand, and even before I learned those words a few years ago, I know that one of the things that hooked us with these Tibetan lamas was not only, you know, the bliss and the experiences we had with them, but what I would say is their authenticity. You know, Lama Yeshe could just like, he would look at you with his whole self, with his whole love, and look right into you and give and love you because he fully loved himself. And you know, if you go back to Lama's talks, that's what he's always saying. Grow yourself, dear. Love yourself, dear. Take care of yourself, dear. When he gave, you know, the 6 yogas of Naropa, his commitment was to abandon your self-pity mind. And that's what he was talking about, you know, this false self. And so I've believed now that it's really, and I looking back at my life, I didn't know those words and I didn't know really too much about that. But I knew that if I wanted to develop bodhicitta, and if I wanted to become a Buddha, if I wanted to transform my mind, I couldn't do it in the environment where I was. At the time, I was teaching at Berkeley, a really cool class called Ecosystemology, which was about holistic thinking. And that's another person I always have so much gratitude for as my teacher because he taught me systems thinking. And that was so integral in my understanding of how to do retreat and how, you know, it's not just the mind, it's the body, it's the environment, it's what we eat, it's everything, you know. And retreat is you have to take everything into consideration, which is what happens when you study systems thinking. But I just sort of had this feeling that if I stayed in my regular world, you know, doing my regular life, that I wouldn't be able to transform myself. And I think that even though I didn't know it at the time, but intuitively, I realized that I needed to find my authenticity, because I believe that unless you do that, your Dharma practice just becomes a new term that wasn't around when I started, spiritual bypassing. Because you end up, you have this false self that you became that got you through your high school and your college and your job and got you married and, all the stuff that we, had to do when we went to school when we were 6. And then you bring in the Dharma and you put the Dharma on top of that. So then you have this false self trying to be the good Buddhist. And so that's why you still have problems. That's why there's still the delusions are pouring out of us, because it has to come from healing of the really deep self. And this, I think, is a really important reason to do retreat, because you have to be able to just stop those patterns that you've done your whole life to actually contact the part of you that needs to be healed, that needs to begin to, because, and another reason this came up in my first retreat is that, everybody talks about shamatha and, getting single point of concentration and having good concentration. And what I found in retreat, the first or second year, I was in, being not talking and just, Roger was nearby, but we didn't, it was good that there was somebody nearby. The second time I retreated, it was all by myself, and that was much harder. But I remember having this vision that here's like me inside here, like the part of me that's, trying to do this practice. And then all around it was like fences and barbed wires and, broken glass and all the stuff that my Dharma is trying to like penetrate through that to get to this core being, which is where my Buddha nature is, and it couldn't do it until I started healing all of this junk, around myself. And luckily I had a book that that my friend Liza Krober turned me on to. It was called, from a psychologist, called Homecoming. And it was all about healing your inner child, And Christine had given me the Drama of a Gifted Child, these different, Alice Miller and Bradshaw. It was like the beginning of this, healing inner child movement stuff. And because His Holiness the Dalai Lama said, you can't go from wrong concept to no concept. You have to go from wrong concept to right concept and then to wrong concept. And of course, that's also within the context of emptiness. We have to understand the different levels of emptiness and get to the prasangika majjhimika, and then we can let go. But I maintain that you also have to delve into, go through and penetrate into that inner being, because that's the one that experiences Buddha nature. That's where your Buddha nature lies. And so this inauthentic way of being in the world, which I'm not talking for everybody, I'm talking for me and I think most people, that is somewhat of one of our obstacles in the West. That, and then also the fact that we have very little understanding of the subtle body. Luckily we have yoga now and we have Qigong and these things. But we also, those two things of learning about your subtle body and healing your wounded self are things that retreat affords you the opportunity to do. You don't have to go to a therapist. You just have to spend time being with yourself, and being quiet. And those things will, when you do the practice like Vajrasattva, those things that need to be healed, they'll bubble up and they'll come out. And with the right tools, and Buddha Dharma does give you the tools, it's the best therapy in the world, because nobody's doing it for you. You do it yourself. So, and then you go beyond that, it's not just about becoming a better human being. It's about, that's like the side thing. You become more kinder, you become more gentle, you become, more understanding, more empathetic, more listening, all these qualities that we want to have. But that's not enough. We have to get enlightened too. and these days, the way the world is, that was Lynn's question, with the world the way it is, shouldn't we all just be socially engaged? And I'd say no. The world today needs enlightened beings more than anything else. And so if we can even just begin to do that, then, then that's what we need. Look around the world. What kind of wise people do we have then? His Holiness, there's a few wise people around, not very many, So is that enough?
That's great. Thank you. Paula.
Well, we can certainly open it up for questions now. Thank you so much. Let's let people ask some questions. Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, I just get on rants sometimes.
Oh, it's great. We love it. If you want to ask a question, just go ahead and either raise your virtual hand or your real hand, or you can send me a message in chat. And we're going to start with our director of Tse Chen Ling, Venerable Carol. He always has a good question for us.
Oh, I love Carol. Carol's very, very, you guys are so lucky to have Carol. She's a very dear bodhisattva.
I don't think so, Paula, but thank you, Paula. If this has been so lovely and so encouraging, I remember those early days, and I imagined you and Roger out, like at Milarepa. I saw the huts after the fact and everything. Just wanted to ask, when you went into that retreat, and then, at first, I've done retreat in the first month. In fact, I've only done about a month-long retreat, and it's always been kind of wonderful. But when you're looking at 3 years, can you talk about like days when you felt like I can't do this anymore, or things came up how did you overcome those? And did they come up? Maybe I'm wrong. Yeah.
Well, for one thing, everybody always says I did 3-year retreats. They were 4-year retreats. And what I need to explain to people is the Kagyus do 3-year retreats, but Gelugpas do great retreats. And great retreats mean you do 10 million mantras plus 11, just a million Yeshi Pengis and 1 million in the Fire Puja. So you do about 12 million mantras of one deity on one cushion, one practice. And what the Kagyus do, they do the preliminaries and stuff within that retreat. So they'll do like the first year's all their preliminaries, and then they do all these different tantric practices, and then they get 6 months of completion stage. So it's more like tantric university. But the people are always like, oh, the Galupas, they don't meditate. But for us, you have to do 9 nundros first, of 100,000 countings, these, and then you go into these long retreats. And so I think that's something to clarify, because a lot of people don't understand that. And what Lama Zopa said, by the time you've spent the 8 years, whatever it took us to train first, plus doing some other short retreats, then you kind of know the territory, you sort of know what you're getting into. And what I would say was, and because of that, those preliminary practices, this is what we both came to on our own. They're so powerful that you never feel like you want to give up. Never did I ever want to give up. I had hard days, and to be honest with you, a blissful meditation, maybe once a week, maybe, every 5 days, that you have these amazing ones where you lose your body and you're just out in space and everything's, rainbows and, those kind of stuff. I mean, that doesn't happen every day, but what does happen every day is Lam Rim. You've got your tools, you've got the Lam Rim books, you've got, you might not have very good concentration, but one of the commentaries I read, I think it was Serkan Rinpoche, maybe it was when I was in my refuge, Nundro, he said that when you can't concentrate very well on the deity or whatever, then you just do Lam Rim practice while you recite the mantra. And so they were Lam Rim retreats, and I'm so grateful to that. And because when you do that over and over and over and over again, it just becomes who you are. It just becomes it's like the thing about those retreats is that I go back to the organic. The transformation is so slow. that you don't really see it happening. It's not like light bulbs go off. It's just that when you go back out into the world, it's a different experience, you know? And so it can be hard. And especially because that retreat, we didn't know what we were getting into. And we were but that's why Rinpoche told us we had to get better houses. He said, because nobody would ever want to try to do what you did. We were just lucky because we'd been, people who camped and lived outside. And so we were used to, I used to go snow camping in Lake Tahoe, so, but, so, I really believe that, and because if you're doing a good retreat, you're not just reading your prayers, you're sitting there going, a little bit like we did, every session you spend 15 minutes developing bodhicitta. And so it's like you're constantly reinforcing bodhicitta, and you just don't want to give up, And so it's sort of like the organic nature of the practice. It takes care of itself. Yeah. And you stay inspired, Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it's wonderful. Wonderful
Yeah.
to hear. Yeah.
Yeah. But it also really helped one day when you and Amy came, and I think you sent me some money and I bought a pair of boots. It was so great. I needed some new shoes. I'll always forget that. I think you'd come because Kitty Central Rinpoche was a Milarepa Center or something. But anyway, you don't remember, but I remember. Yeah. And did you have a question?
I have a question, and it kind
Okay,
of
Effie.
it kind of transitions with Venerable Keros. I'm wondering about, it must be such an incredible transition when you come out of a retreat like that. I just wonder what it's like reintegrating with our everyday world. Just curious.
Oh, never did. We're still doing it.
I'm still doing it. My friends here are laughing,
Well,
It's
I had a friend who was a monk in India, and he came back and he didn't know how to use an ATM machine. So I'm assuming with your long retreats, it must have been that times 10,
Well, it's funny because the first time I came out of retreat, the internet and email had been developed, and I didn't know what that was. And the second time I came out of a long retreat, I remember I had to go to the doctor, and I borrowed Elaine Jackson's car, and I went to town, and she said, "Well, could you just go by the pet shop and buy me some bags of dog food?" And I remember standing in line, all these people were talking to themselves. And I thought, has everybody gone crazy? And then I didn't know about cell phones. I didn't know that they were all talking on the telephone. But then I had to, no, it's not easy. And the one thing that I would really recommend to people is to know that if you do even a month-long retreat or even a 3-month-long retreat, you need to finish the retreat and just spend some time going in and out and in and out, before you go out. And the second time I finished retreat, I didn't do that very gradually because I wasn't in the position to. I wasn't in a Dharma center, and I didn't have anybody to take care of me. And my friends who were supporting me, the money just stopped. So there I was. I didn't have money. I didn't have a car. It wasn't very easy the second time around. And to be honest, I think I'm still damaged from that somewhat, So I would say that it's really important that what I tell people is that going into retreats really important, like to really rest up. And if you're going to do, like when the master's program, I did a course on how to do retreat for the master's program at Lama Tsongkhapa Institute about a decade ago, and they all had to do a year-long retreat. And I said to them, the first month, just don't do anything. Just recover from life, just stop. And then the last month, just slowly come out, go out a little bit, go see some people, go have tea with people, come back. Because the hardest part, Effie, is talking. Because, I didn't talk, for years. And what happens is you start talking and you realize it's so exhausting, and even now I don't like talking very much. And even now, to be honest with you, if I have to have like this, and then if I have to go talk to somebody on the telephone for an hour, I don't sleep that night. because my nervous system just gets too speeded up. So I mean, I think I didn't come out of retreat quite properly, or maybe it's always like that, but I just have to be careful, because when you start talking, it's like everything goes, because you've been so quiet, and it's not easy. And I even after I finished those long retreats, I still spent a lot of the year in retreat, And then when I had to leave Shine Land in 2018, I don't get to do retreat as much. And I have to admit, I suffer from it, because my nervous system wants that quiet time. I want to be able to do yoga every day. I want to be able to not talk all the time. And I don't really have that luxury anymore. And it's my own fault. It's part of this agency business I was talking about. It's this thing of just saying no. It's hard to say no, particularly when you have bodhisattva vows and you want to help people. So I have this balance of trying to, how much can I help people and how much do I take for myself, So, and you notice lamas, they all have attendants. They don't do their own emails. They don't talk to people, they don't do anything but sit in their rooms and do practice all day long until they have to go teach. So that's how they're able to maintain that, But a Western person, I mean, not that I want attendance or all that stuff, and not that I'm a lama, but I did become accustomed to having a lot of time to practice and meditate and get into deep, subtle states, And so it's a challenge. It's a real challenge. And I understand why my friend Roger is still in retreat, Because once you've done that, it's not that easy. But it is, I mean, you should talk. I mean, Elaine Jackson did a 3-year retreat too, and I think she's pretty well adjusted. But I don't think hers were quite so strict. I think she probably talked during her retreats, and I know she visited with her children and stuff like that. So it depends on the kind of retreat that you do, and not all retreats have to be that strict. But I didn't know better. I just thought that's what you're supposed to do. And I'm glad I did,
It sounds really intense, that transition. So thank you very much for talking about
Yeah.
that. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it is intense. So that's a good thing to bring up for sure. Yeah.
Okay, I have another just quick follow-up, and then I have a question from the chat. You also play music, or did at one time. And that seems to me, like very different than the whole retreat.
Oh, that's a really good point. No, the way you stay happy. I mean, I was really lucky. The second time I did retreat, I'd met Geshe Sopa, because, I got ordained because I was asked to do a second retreat by Reba Rinpoche, or kind of told to. And we were having a lot of obstacles. So Rinpoche said, well, you just have to get ordained if you're going to do this retreat, So I said, okay, I'll try it. I'll do it. I want to do the retreat, But Geshe Sopa was the one, and he insisted that Geshe Sopa ordain us. This is the elder Geshe Sopa, not the young Tenzin Sopa. And he said the most important thing in retreat is to keep your mind happy. And so Roger developed, and I shared this with Elaine, and I know I think she followed that when she did her retreat. He said, doing retreat is perfecting the art of the one-person party. Does that make sense?
I'm sorry, could you say that again? I didn't quite get it.
The way to have a successful retreat is to perfect the art of the one-person party. So you have to know how to enjoy yourself, because if it's all just hard work, you can't sustain it, So I always explain to people, whatever you like to do, if it's writing or drawing or painting, or bring something fun, if you're on a long retreat, it's important to have a creative, artistic outlet. And
That's wonderful. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much. And I just have just a teeny tiny more question that made me want to ask, which is, I assume you celebrate Sog when you're in retreat,
yeah,
but it's by yourself.
it's the one-person party.
That's what it made me think of, because when I think of Sog, I always think of it always feels like kind of like a birthday party. It's a celebratory atmosphere, but yeah, you're having that one person party while you're in retreat.
Well, see, but this is what I'm talking about why Western people need so much help because Tibetans have a one-person party every day, no matter what. They're just always having a one-person party. They're always enjoying themselves. Whereas we're so serious, you know. My friend Julia Hanks, who's a therapist now, she termed the disease, she said they need another disease in the psychology list of diseases. It's the SBS, which is the serious Buddhist syndrome. So if you're an SBS and you go into retreat, you're just not going to have a good time. So you have to overcome your SBS, but that's part of finding your authenticity and all this kind of stuff I'm telling you about. You know, you just have to learn to have a good time by yourself. But the other really important point that I didn't say is that the really great thing about retreat is that because of that, you're like forced to develop emotional independence. Like your happiness doesn't depend on outside forces. Can you believe what an incredible revolutionary thing that is? That you don't have to buy something, you don't have to be with somebody, you don't have to go anywhere, it forces you to learn to be happy with nothing. And I mean, in this day and age, that's revolutionary, you know? So it's really, but you have to learn how to enjoy being by yourself, you know? It's party. I mean, I would even put on music and dance sometimes, you know? Because you can tell when you're starting to move into SBS. It's like, yeah.
But you also play music.
Yeah, well, the playing music thing, I'll just say that really briefly. What happened was, I'm not really a musician. I always wanted to be, but I never had the opportunity to study music. But when I was a teenager in Berkeley, California, it was the folk music scene, you know, and I had a guitar and I learned all kinds of songs. I can still play, you know, all the Bob Dylan songs and Joan Baez songs, all that stuff, you know. And we would do it with friends and it was really fun. But then when I quit doing that, you know, really early on. And then one day, it was when I was at Milarepa Center, maybe some of you know who Lorne Ladner is. He's a good friend of mine, and because I met him back then. And Lorne was he was still in undergraduate school. He came up and he would come and visit with Terry. And one day he was taking us out because that's when we were building our retreat huts, and we went to the county fair in St. Johnsbury. And I was just sitting in the back of the seat, and sometimes I talk out loud, and I think out loud, and I said, it might be really nice to have a guitar in this retreat. And of course, how old was I? I was 37, I think. I hadn't played the guitar really since I was about 19, so it was a long time. And so the next time he came to Milarepa Center, he gave me his guitar, which was very, very kind. And I just said, well, okay. And I had a tiny house. Carol, you've seen those houses. I stuck it under my bed. And after about, I don't know how long it took, maybe 6 months or a year. And I just wanted to sing. And I was taking precepts every day. And so I couldn't sing my folk songs. And I didn't really want to sing, Tibetan Sangye Chodam. That's not quite the same. So I decided, and so it just started coming out of me, these Dharma songs. I didn't really write them. And so I picked up Lawrence guitar, and I think the first song I wrote was, if I could be anything in this world, I'd be Buddha. So I wrote that song. And then another came and another came. And so I started singing songs. And I figured that if they were Dharma songs, I wasn't breaking my precepts. So I hope I wasn't. And by the way, I'm going to put a plug for my songs. Hopefully in about a month, my songs are going to be on Spotify. So that would be nice for people to hear them. Yeah.
That is so exciting. Very, very exciting. Thank you so much. I feel like I'm kind of, taking a lot of your time.
That's all right.
To other
We still have time.
So if people have questions, just let me know. You can raise your hand or you can message me in the chat. I do have a question from the chat. What would you suggest to people who think about doing retreat for the first time? Particularly, do you recommend doing group retreats first? And could you also talk about the benefits of group retreat versus solo retreat?
That's a really good question. I would never advise anyone to do their first retreat by themselves. You have to learn how. And so like Vajrapani Institute, since I think most of you are in San Francisco, they have great, they like go to a retreat with Renee, you know. I mean, Renee is a fantastic retreat leader. You learn how to do retreat, or, you know, whoever, or yeah, I mean, just go and do a group retreat, or go somewhere else and do a group retreat. And it's good if you can do a longer, like just go to a week one, try out for a week. And then if there's one that's a Lamrim retreat, because I think anybody can go to Renee's retreats, right? They're not Highest Yoga Tantra. I don't think so.
As far as
So
I know, people can go, yeah, usually.
yeah, and because his are about 2 weeks long, and then you know, and then maybe think about doing a longer retreat, and you can go to Shiniland or someplace, you know, to do a retreat by yourself. But I would do quite a few group retreats before trying to do one on your own, for sure. Yeah.
So Joe has her hand raised, and then I have another question in the chat, I think, as well. Okay.
Okay.
Hello. I'm quite nervous. I
Don't be nervous, Joe. You think you're nervous? Well, what do you think about me? I haven't seen her and talked forever.
well, and it might be a strange question. But before I ask my question, I'd like to say I've heard your name a few times, and this is the first talk from this series that I've come to. And I didn't know that you lived on one of the Shetland Isles. I live in Scotland, but on the mainland. I've done for 26 years. And my question is, how you've probably answered it actually quite early on, but I'll ask it anyway. How, with your situation now on Shetland or one of the Shetland Isles, how do you cope with the world out there? Because I presume you're not in retreat at the moment.
I listen to the news like you. I know what's going on in the world, and especially in the United States, and I'm completely brokenhearted and flabbergasted just like everybody else. But the way I deal with it nowadays is that I just keep telling myself we just have to get enlightened, and we need to keep the Dharma alive. I mean, I just rejoice at Carol and Lynn, you know, and all the and people who run Vajrapani, and Colby running Shiniland, and you know, because you know, when I was younger, I had a lot of optimism that we were going to change the world. And I thought that Buddhism was going to be part of changing the world, but now I just feel like we just have to preserve the Dharma. And also that we need to, we just had we had a conference at Land of Joy, which is, you can go to Land of, I don't know if you know about Land of Joy, but it's down by Newcastle. You can go to retreats there. And we just had a group retreat talking about what we're going to do about the climate crisis. And basically what we decided very quickly after having all these talks about politics was that the best thing we can do is to continue to put as much effort as we can into our practice to cultivate the kind of a strong presence, love, wisdom, the capacity to listen, and then and pray to be of service in these times, because I really believe that what you pray for will come. So if you just open your heart and say, you know, how can I be of best benefit? And then continue to work on yourself, and also know what your capacities are. You know, like if you're really good at political organization or stuff, you can do that, or whatever you're good at, you know, bring that to the table of the world, you know. But I think that as times get more and more intense, our inner work is going to be more and more important. To just have people that are stable and kind and compassionate and can be there in a time of crisis, because we don't know what we're going to be asked to do or to deal with, or what kind of you know, where we're going to be or what's going to happen. And so if you can, if there's a, I mean, and of course do the normal things like, you know, write to your politicians and let people know what you think. And you know, we need to continue to do that. And just don't despair. You know, just really do not despair, and do that by gratitude. Like, I think gratitude is a really good practice to do every day. Wake up in the morning and just, even if it's you're just grateful because you live in Scotland and it's a beautiful place, or grateful for, your friend across the street, or, it doesn't have to be big gratitudes. But I think gratitude is something that really keeps us centered in a positive mind, even in a time of really great crisis, is gratitude, and also refuge and bodhicitta, if you're a Buddhist person. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. What do you think? Anything else I should say? Mary, you have something to add to that?
About how to deal with the times?
Yeah.
No, I think you're absolutely right. All
Yeah.
you can do is work on yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, I mean, my friend Mary's here doing retreat, and she just, we just have to keep purifying our minds. She said that to me the other day, so that because, and pray that, as we develop bodhicitta, that we will be able to help,
Thank you. I think and I think for me anyway, intention is important, and planning. I'll go if I do go out. Who can I, how can I, be kind to everybody I meet? But also, for me as well, I've noticed there's a thin line between helping and interfering.
That's
And when
right. That's why listening is so important. Listening. Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you. Yeah.
But because when I go into the interfering bit, then of course I'm doing this for my own ego's sake, so yes, but thank you ever so much.
Yeah. And the other thing that's just really obvious is, like, don't buy new clothes, don't just recycle, all the kind of environmental things. We can use your car less, just all the little things you can do, to minimize our impact on the planet. But it doesn't look like we're making very much progress, does it? Sad to say, but we just can't give up hope. You just never know. And I really believe in the power of prayer and doing pujas, like Judy can tell you stories about puja prayer. And because, people say, oh, what are you doing just in retreat, but I really believe that, and I know now that one of the things Zoom has taught me, being on Zoom, is that how interconnected we are. Because I can be here and be meditating with people in California, and we have some kind of thing going on, So that shows me that our prayers were, and especially when you do pujas like Tara pujas and these kind of things, I really believe that they have an impact in the world. And it doesn't have to just be going out. I mean, it's good to go out in the streets and stuff, but in some ways, I think maybe this deeper way of transforming the human minds is even more powerful than politics, if we just knew enough to do it. Yeah. But you have to do both. I mean, you have to use Tibet as an example, I mean, they were doing all their prayers, but still they weren't doing their politics, So the 13th Dalai Lama pleaded with them, you have to join the world, So yeah. So we just have to become more and more wise, I think, And also it's really important not to be too busy. Because when you just stay busy all the time, there's no time to reflect and really check about, the wisdom, not like the emptiness wisdom, but what they call sharab, just the worldly wisdom about what you're doing with your life, Yeah.
Thank you. And I think we could help the politicians by loving them. I think they're not loved enough. Bless them.
Yeah. Mary wants to say something.
Can you hear me?
No, I'll repeat it. You can come. Here's my mic.
Okay. Well, along those same lines, I think a lot of people ask about, what can you do about the divisiveness? And I think that there is such a thing as divisive speech that we need to watch ourselves doing, and we need to be careful about that. And so that is something that we can work on. And Geshe Sherab said, somebody asked him, what can you do? And he said, just don't make it worse.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because every little act that one of my songs, from when I did that first retreat was something like, every thought I have affects the whole world. So if we watch our thoughts, just having negative thoughts affects the world. What was that thing about the butterfly theory? One moment of mind affects the butterfly on the other side of the world, and not to mention our speech. So, yeah, especially that's a very good point, Mary, because divisiveness is the problem, isn't it?
It is, and there's a lot more middle ground there than people want to realize.
Yeah, we don't want to listen. That's the other thing. We don't want to listen to,
Yeah.
Yeah. Any more questions? Because Lynn, how much time do you need? 15 minutes, 10 minutes?
She just needs a couple minutes at the end.
I have,
Okay. Then we have time for some more.
yeah, and I've got one, but I want to give it over to the other group, the rest of the group, because there may be somebody in the queue that I'm not aware of, Effie.
I have one question in the chat I'd like to ask, and then if anybody else raises their hand, and then we'll go to Lynn for a final question. How's that?
I don't know, I should be the finale, but go
Okay,
on.
well, we'll see how it goes. Anyway, the question that we have from the chat is, do you have any recommendations on how to structure a day in retreat? For example, how many hours a day in formal practice?
Okay. Retreats, that's why it's good to go to a group retreat, because a group retreat, you learn the structure of retreat. And the solitary retreats are the same. It's really good to have a discipline. So you always do 4 meditation sessions a day, unless something comes up, like, you really need to go for a walk because you need to take a break. But what's the most important thing about retreat is to not concentrate too hard. Western people, they always try too hard, and then they get really tired and they don't want to continue with their meditation. So that's why the thing about staying happy and staying light is really important. So you do, it depends on the retreat you're doing. If you're doing a shamatha retreat, you do many, many, many 15-minute sessions, or you do short spurts of meditation within your tantric practice. But generally speaking, you do a session before breakfast, an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, depends on your level of, skill and experience. And then you have breakfast, and then you rest a little while. Then you do a second session before lunch. And then if you're by yourself, then you stop and cook lunch. And then you have a rest. And then say if you eat lunch at 12, then you might start again at 3. You do another session from like 3 to 4:30 or 5. Then you have another rest. And if you're having dinner, you don't always have to eat dinner. Then you have another break, and then you do another session in the evening. So you're really only, you can, and in the beginning you do shorter sessions, and as the retreat goes on, you do longer sessions. But I just like to tell people too that I also did 4 exercise sessions because I needed to do that because of my subtle body, because I'm a Western person. It was so full of, nervousness and agitation from just going to school, It's cramming for exams and all that kind of stuff that like wrecks ours for meditation. But so I would do prostrations in the morning. A lot of you know the 35 Buddhas. I do the 35 Buddhas in the morning. And then I'd have breakfast, and then I'd have another session afternoon, and then I would stop, and before lunch I'd do a Qigong session. And then I have my afternoon session, and then after the afternoon session I'd go for a walk for about a half an hour. And if you're in a really enclosed place, you can just walk. Tibetan Lamas just walk around their houses, circumambulating all the holy objects in their houses. And then you do your evening session, and then I do a yoga session before I went to sleep at night, just to stretch out my body so I could continue to sit. And I really recommend that people do some yoga practice just to get the body to can sit. It's difficult to sit for long periods of time. And if you can't sit cross-legged, you can sit in a chair, but yoga will help you get flexible enough to sit cross-legged. And and that is preferred. But you just have to, but the other thing is you have to know yourself and know what you can do. And sometimes maybe you do a shorter or a longer session, but definitely retreats are quite structured. And I think that structure really helps. And I mean, I might not always start at the same time. I might start 10 minutes later, or, around that time. And the other thing I want to tell you about retreat is that a lot of people think that when you do a solitary retreat, you have to do it like you do a group retreat, which means you have to get up and start at 5 o'clock in the morning. You don't have to do that. I mean, I was so fortunate to meet Ginlam Rinpa, who was one of those yogis who, could do tumo and blazing and dripping. And I mean, he attained enlightenment in one lifetime. And he told, I met him in 1985, I think it was. And he said that when yogis do retreat, they sleep as long as they need to, because a tired mind cannot concentrate and you just get really frustrated. And my friend Roger observed that a lot of people, well, not a lot of people, but there's only a few people that came to Shinny Land, they would last about 18 months. And then they'd have to leave, even though they'd come to do longer. And he said he would always see a pile of tea bags and cookie wrappers, and you can't do retreat with false energy. I mean, a little tea is okay, but if you're having to drink, a strong cup of tea or coffee to do your sessions, you just need to stop and sleep for a week, and get your body rested enough, or go to the doctor and find out why you're tired. Maybe your thyroid's off, or you need B12, or, you really need to work with your body to make a retreat work, because your mind and your body are inseparable. The mind rides on the winds. And if your body's tired and worn out, then so is your mind. So it's really important to eat strong food, eat good food, find out what kind of food really nourishes you, and eat that food. And if you turn out to be the kind of person who needs to eat meat sometimes. I mean, I have a friend who's a yoga teacher, and she said, the best yoga teachers bring the yoga to the body, not the body to the yoga. So she works with people one-on-one and designs a yoga practice, this is Yeshi, for that person. And I would say the same. This is the good thing about a solitary retreat, is that you can eat what is good for you. You can sleep as much as you need to sleep, and you can make your sessions, fit who you are. But at the same time, you do need discipline. So discipline doesn't mean this is why this authenticity thing is so important, because discipline isn't beating yourself up. And we've been beating ourselves up all our lives if we're born in the West. And so it's about learning to listen and be kind and know what you deeply need, not what your false self needs, but what you deeply need to nourish yourself so that you can grow yourself from where you are. So I like to use that phrase, start where you are. And if you start where you are and you're tired and you need help, and then you start there. But to try and like, oh, I'm a yogi, I'm going to sit here and do all, you're just going to crash and burn. So that's what I'd say. Yeah.
I have a
That-
question related
Is
to
that
what-
okay? But does that answer the question? I just want to know, does that answer your question? Yeah.
I think so, yeah. I have a question related to what you just said, which is if you could just zero in a little bit more on the sleep, because you're saying like just sleep for a week, but I feel like I don't know, that would be very hard unless you were like getting exercise and doing other things. Like, do you
Yeah. Well, I
sleep
should
in
be more
retreat?
precise. I
Yeah.
should be more precise. What I mean to say is, yeah, and sometimes I get carried away, and I'm not this is one of my faults, is not being very precise. But what I'm saying is take what Lama Yeshe said many, 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 many times, is take care of your body. So if that means, you might not need a lot of sleep, but maybe you need more exercise, or maybe you need, but you kind of, I mean, I used to think that doing and I'm not saying everybody needs to do 4 years of retreat, and I'm not saying you have to give up your job or anything like that. I'm just saying try it for a week, try it for a month, you can maybe get a month. But I used to see like the kind of retreats I did, it was like training for the Olympics. You really have to have a strong body as well. You can't just sustain, because there's never a day off. You just, every single day for, 400, 500 days. I don't know how many days it is. What is it? 365 times 4? How many days is that? I don't know. Over 1,000 days, you work every single day. So it's like running a marathon. And I know some people now do take a day off in retreat, and I think that's not a bad idea, or an afternoon off. And when I did my second retreat at Elaine's, I did once a week. I'd go for a long hike because I needed that. So yeah, that's more what I mean. Does that help?
Yeah, Anna, who asked the question actually in chat, said yes, that has answered her question. Thank
Yeah.
you so much. I think we're actually not going to go to a final question. I think we're just about out
Yeah,
of
it's
time.
time. We
So
are.
I'm going to go ahead and share the prayers and ask Venerable Carol if she doesn't mind leading us. And then I'll go to Lynn to share some more information about the Treasury of Lives. Oh, is that okay? Is there something else you want to say before we do that, Paula?
I just want to say thank you to you for the opportunity, and I really hope that this benefits people. And I also would just like to thank all the people that have supported me all these years. And so, when you ask about me being not in retreat so much anymore, I just feel like it's kind of my payback time. For so many years, I was so fortunate. And, Lama Zopa Rinpoche made it kind of clear that it's time now to share. So I just want to share my gratitude with all the people that continue to help me and have helped me, including my teachers. And I hope that this is helpful to people too. That's all. So thank you for the opportunity.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish but increase more and more. Dangri rawe korwe jinkam dir pandan dewa malu jumwe ne chenre siwan tensing yatsui shabe site bardu ten chi.
And I just add too that we want to dedicate for the end to the wars and to find solutions to the climate crisis and for the divisiveness in the world to end, and that we can create a culture of nonviolence and compassion. And for all the children in the world who are growing up in this age of incredible uncertainty. Yeah. And they can find balance and hope in their lives. Yeah.
Thank you. Now we'll go to Lynn.
Thanks, Effie, and thank you, Paula. Mention of kids right now. Wow. Okay, I'm going to highlight the Treasury of Lives. I'm going to read it out loud while you guys look at her or look at yourself or look at Paula. It's about the woman Sarah Condro, who was born at the end of the 19th century, died in 1940. In her biography, she records that throughout her life, she had many visionary experiences, interacting with dakinis and siddhas and traveling to many extraordinary Buddha fields. Traumatized by a forced marriage and by the death of her beloved mother at the age of 12, Sarah Condro experienced a vision of Vajravarahi that changed the course of her life. Vajravarahi empowered Sarah Condro in the two treasures that would be her life's main teachings: the secret treasury of reality dakinis and the dakini's heart essence. Sarah Condro traveled widely throughout Golok, which is part of Tibet, with her attendants. Her main teachings were the treasures of Dujum Lingpa and Drime Wozer, as well as her own. She died at the age of 48, but it is said that before her body was burned, it dissolved into light until it was the size of a 7-year-old child's body. It's a sign of attainment, ladies and gentlemen. All right.
He also, there's a book about Sarah Condro. I don't know if you know, but there is a
Oh.
book about her. Yeah.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah. Yeah. I have the book.
Very good.
And I just also, we have to dedicate for that the young Lama Zopa Rinpoche grows up with lots of kindness around him, and he gets the proper schooling and education and not trauma. And also to continue to pray for Osalhita, because he really needs our prayers now. So I would just like to ask you that as well.
Okay.
That's
Well,
okay.
thank you. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
Again, on behalf of Tse Chen Ling, thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Especially thank you to Paula for your interesting and informative presentation. I look forward to seeing people again in the Zoom room soon. We're having a whole series of events in this Women of Wisdom series. So if you go onto our website, you'll see lots of great speakers and programs coming up. Thank you so much. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Paula. Thank you, Lynn. Thank
Yeah,
you,
thank you.
Effie.
Nice to see you all.
Thanks
Thank you.
everyone for being here.
Thank you, everybody.
Paula.
Thanks everybody. Thanks. Mary.
Bye. Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Yeah.